do this alone, so I need encouragement too to pause and reflect and look, see what that is.
Thanks, Nev. I suppose the reason why I wanted to take a moment this morning was Nev had shared last week with us that around this Isaiah 43 doing a new thing. And if I'm really honest, Nev will not mind me saying it, if I'm really honest, whenever Nev said, I'm really feeling the weight of Isaiah 43:13, I feel like I've been around long enough that I've heard that so many times. So whenever Nev shared that, I was like, oh, really, Nev? We're going back to Isaiah 43. Behold, I do a new thing. And I caught myself on. But the first line, the opening remark from the speaker on Friday morning, Pastor Egu from London, the opening line felt like it's a word for the church that he's been carrying from the start of the year, was Isaiah 43, verse 19. Behold, I do a new thing. And you can imagine my ears just pricked up. I was just like, oh man, this is something for us as a collective group of churches to pay attention to, and it is something for us as a family to lean into. Because that question that Nev's reminded us of, that is written in these verses, do you not perceive it? And we've sang that actually in our last song. Can you hear? Can you hear the sound of heaven touching earth? And this is a personal thing for me, and it's a challenge, it's an invitation, as Nev has said, for us all to think about. Because I know that I just have not, there's just too often in my life at the moment that I'm not pausing long enough to stop, to pay attention. I'm just fearful of what we're going to miss because we haven't been able to see, we haven't been able to perceive, we haven't been able to understand. And so Psalm 102, verse 13, these are two or three things that I want to talk about that sort of felt like they were the threads through yesterday and Friday. Listen to the beautiful words that David penned in Psalm 102. I know you are about to rise and show your tender love to Zion. Now is the time, Lord, for your compassion and mercy to be poured out. The appointed time has come for your prophetic promises to be fulfilled. As David wrote these words thousands of years ago, but this felt like they just carried an extra bit of weight. As you're thinking about the Lord, this idea of the Lord doing a new thing, of him stirring the church to something fresh, to awaken us afresh to what it is that he wants to do and for us to participate in. The boldness almost of David's prayer here. I know, Lord, that you're about to rise. And so to be around other people across the land, right across Ireland, and almost find yourself in conversation, trying to find yourself in the slipstream of where they are making these same declarations that David was making. I know, Lord, that you're about to rise and about to show your love. Now is the time to do it, Lord. There's the sense of boldness in that prayer. Now is the time, Lord, for your compassion and your mercy to be poured out. The appointed time has come for your prophetic promises to be fulfilled. And yesterday morning, Hannah, a girl that her and her husband have came over from England and are leading a church in Newton Ards. And again, she just shared how David continued just over and over throughout the Psalms was just bold. The boldness of his prayer in Psalm 4, verse 4, answer me when I call you. Just the boldness of David's prayer, the urgency, the expectation of that he just was desperate for God to move, and he's sensing that he was about to move. And as she shared, she talked about the culture that David found himself in. A culture of people that were being caught up with the delusion of self, the promotion of self. And she was sharing some of that stuff. You can't help but think, I know it's so much different now, but there is something similar about the time and the culture that we're living in now. The delusion of self, the promotion of self. And so David, in that context, into that cultural space, is saying, answer me, O Lord. He says, in verse 4. Psalm 4, verse 4. Come on, Bible. Tremble in awe before the Lord, and do not sin against him. Be still upon your bed, and search your heart before him. The boldness of his prayers, the desperation for the Lord, trembling in awe before him. And I was thinking of that verse whenever Neville was talking about this idea of fear. And I want to suggest maybe that sometimes we tremble at the wrong things. There is a holy awe. There's a version of this verse that talks about the holy awe. Tremble before the holy awe of the Lord. Do not sin against him. Be still upon your bed and search your heart before him. Yesterday as well, yesterday afternoon, we were in Luke chapter 18. We don't have time to go into it this morning, but Luke chapter 18 is the story of this widow who is just persistent in going to this unjust judge for justice. And she continues to go after, and eventually the unjust judge just gives up and says, give her whatever she wants. But the thrust of that parable, the thrust of the parable in Luke chapter 18 is to be persistent in prayer. To be persistent, to persevere, to prevail, whatever words you want to use. And so this idea just really stood out for me personally, and stood out for us as we're being challenged as a collective group of churches. What is it that the Lord is saying? What is the invitation of the Lord at this moment? At this now moment, what is his invitation? And I know some of these things are stuff that we've heard before, but it feels like there's an urgency to them. It feels like there is a wide open invitation to persist in prayer. Because as much as we are going to talk about seeing transformation in our families, to see real impact in the lives of our communities and our workplaces, wherever we find ourselves, I would love it, because I just would love to find another way to see impact and transformation without the idea of persevering, without the idea of prevailing, because that's going to take a time. There's a cost to intercession. There's a cost to prevailing in prayer. And too often I think maybe even too often the church has not been willing to count the cost. But the reality is, if there was a shortcut, Dad says this often, and I'm going to repeat him, if there was a shortcut, I'd have found it by now. If there's a shortcut to this, I think we maybe would have found it. But there's not. There's no shortcut to seeing the kingdom come. There's no shortcut to kingdom impact, to kingdom transformation, than the foundation of intercessory prayer. And so the boldness of the prophets continue throughout the scriptures. Throughout the Old Testament, we'll see it over and over again. And I shared Isaiah 62 a number of weeks back. Isaiah 62, the prophet says, you watchmen waiting upon the Lord, do not give him any rest. Before that he says, give yourselves no rest. Set watchmen on the towers, and then call on the Lord and give yourselves no rest. But he goes on and says, and give him no rest. Give him no rest until he establishes Jerusalem. So there's license. Isaiah the prophet gives us license to be a nuisance to God. He gives us license to be a nuisance and to continue to give him no rest until he establishes Jerusalem. And I am so guilty of this. I can so easily grow tired. I can so easily grow frustrated. And there's times that you go to the scriptures looking for comfort in those moments of frustration, and actually they're unfortunately that's not the place to go at times. If you're wanting to find a quick fix, if you're wanting to find another way, but to give him no rest, to persevere, to persist, you'll not find it in the scriptures. And we talked about Abraham yesterday. And Abraham had to wait 13 years of silence. Phil Emerson, pastors Emmanuel, said he grew up that there was 4 ways. There are 3 ways that God answered prayer: yes, no, and wait. He shared it from his own personal story that he's realized that there's four answers to prayer: yes, no, wait, and silence. And here Abraham faced 13 years of silence. And in the silence, we know some of the story. I don't want to assume too much. I don't like to do that, but you could go into those early bulk of chapters in Genesis and read Abraham's story and realize that what he did in the silence, waiting for the promise, waiting to see what was promised to him, the kingdom come, the nations being transformed, but in the silence he took things into his own hands. In the silence he took in Hagar and they gave birth to Ishmael. All of these things that took them away from what God had called them to, took them away from the promises that he wanted to fulfill in their lives. And how often do we do that? How often are we guilty of that? That in the silence we take things into our own hands, we go our own way, we do our own thing to our detriment, if the truth be told. And there's an invitation again as I go back to Psalm 4 verse 4, while it's still open here. Tremble in awe before the Lord. Do not sin against him. Be still upon your bed and search your heart before him. And so whether it's at the lake or wherever it is that you'll find a place where you can lie down and be still, in the silence, be silent long enough. So it felt like the Lord spoke to me yesterday. Like you need to be silent long enough to hear what is in your own heart. I suppose that's where I'm, hopefully not too much of a strenuous link, but where I'm connecting what we're talking about on our Sunday mornings, about watching how we speak, watching what comes out of our mouth. I think it's really important that that we're silent long enough to discover what is in our own heart, because out of the overflow of what's in here, the mouth speaks. And so more than that, and just to touch on what Neville has said about the joy of being able to have some of our young people join in with young people, teenagers from right across this island. Because the story of Abraham, if you go to Genesis 17, you'll see the promise Abraham being reminded of the promise. And he's reminded again a few chapters later. But the story of Abraham is a reminder to us that the promises are not just for us. They are for those who are coming after us. And over throughout the scriptures, you see how desperate God is to bless our descendants, to bless those that are coming after us. And the story of Abraham is a reminder of that, but there's often, like we could go into so many other stories of the heroes of the faith that see that is a theme that runs throughout. Promises are not just for us, they're for those who are coming after us. And so it was with great excitement yesterday, and this is what I want you to hear. I think it's important that we hear this. And Robbie stood up and shared about signal fires. And signal fires is just this initiative that a load of churches across Northern Ireland and down south as well, that just gather together every so often and worship. And Robbie testified just of the incredible things that the Lord is doing amongst our young people right across the nation. I was so grateful for Robbie, because he didn't say it was anything to do with him. He didn't say it was anything to do with, he pointedly said it was nothing to do with him. It was nothing to do with their church. It was just what the Lord was doing. And they were responding to that invitation. He said all they're having to do at the minute is showing up. And there's a hunger, and the Lord is doing something among our young people that is just incredibly exciting. And he asked that question almost that Isaiah the prophet asked. Can you see it? Are you paying attention? Are you standing still long enough to pay attention to what it is that the Lord's doing? Because if you were, that's why I want to share these stories, because listen, pay attention. The Lord is doing something among our young people in Lurgan, in Lisburn, in Sligo, beyond. Like, pay attention to that. And the truth is, as I try to combine these two threads, the idea of persevering in prayer and the idea of what God is doing among the next generation, it has to stir something within us to persevere for them. It has to stir something within us to give him no rest for the sake of our young people. The amount of things that are trying to numb their attention, the amount of things that are desperate for their affection, is remarkable. And so what do we need to do? Are we willing to count the cost? Are we willing to persevere? Are we willing to give him no rest for the sake of our young people? Because the reality is, and I don't want to, I'm not doing this to incite fear, but the enemy is after, the enemy is here, is about credible that the Lord is doing something. He really is doing a new thing, but it doesn't stop the enemy. He continues to steal, to kill, and to destroy. And so he's not only after where they are now, because he is, but he's after what's inside of them. He's after who they are becoming. He's after the potential and the gifting and all that is within them. If he can snuff it out now, that's what he wants to do. And so I'm desperate that we, because we're seeing signs of it. As you hear stories, you hear testimonies, if we pay attention long enough, you'll hear stories of what this being fulfilled. The prophet Isaiah says in Isaiah 42, there is all of a sudden, seems like there's streams in the wasteland. And I love that because it doesn't feel like that long ago that I was talking to youth leaders across different churches and they were just saying it was a struggle. Saying it was like it almost felt like a wasteland. And now we're seeing signs of streams in the wasteland. Now we're seeing signs of the barren ground being broken up. And we have this opportunity as the barren ground is broken up. We have the opportunity in prayer to begin to sow some seeds. And I know that we have, and I honor those that have sowed seeds in prayer, that have persevered. But we want to begin to water them. We want to begin to water them to begin to see a harvest. We want to begin to see life. We want to begin to see growth in our young people and in our communities. And so it was mentioned a couple of times over the last few days, the importance of just understanding the times. Understanding the times and knowing what to do. And that's why I felt like days like yesterday are important. That's why I feel like it's just important to share some of the things that were brought up, because we get an insight, we get a glimpse into what God is doing. And so the series that we're going through on a Sunday is really important, and the series that we're going through on Wednesday is hugely important. But it's also important to stop and to pay attention to what is going on across our county and across our land. To pay attention to what it is that God is doing, to get a glimpse into what it is that he is calling us to. And again, these things are in many ways 101, but it felt like a reminder. It felt like a reminder that I needed a call to the church, to a deeper level of intimacy. And maybe some of it that could be a bit funny with that word, but that's what the Father is desperate for. And I love this translation of Psalm 25, verse 14. There is a private place reserved for the devoted lovers of Yahweh, where they sit near him and receive the revelation secrets of his promises. There's a private place reserved for the devoted lovers of Yahweh, where they sit near him and receive the revelation secrets of his promises. There's a call to the church to a deeper level of intimacy. The pain of that is that there's a new level of consecration that is required for the sons and daughters of God. And again, there's no shortcut to this. There is a cost to consecration. And I'm wrestling with this because you realize that there is little power without purity. And so this call to persevere in prayer, this call to a deeper level of intimacy, this call to a new level of consecration. And then to wrap it all up, I suppose just what I've already been saying, just this line that was shared a couple of times, the church is being called to a season of unprecedented prayer. It was just nice to hear that word again. Hadn't heard it since COVID. Being called unprecedented prayer. To experience and to see and to live into something that we've never seen or experienced before. I just can't help but long for that, begin to stir a hunger and a thirst. And some of you will be familiar with the story of Aaron and Hur in Exodus chapter 17. Because this is a call for us, I think. This is for us to take seriously as individuals. Our prayer life, our consecration, our intimacy. But Moses makes his way up the hill. Moses makes his way up the hill where the battle is going on in the valley. And as he's up on the hill and he's interceding and he's praying about the battle that's taking place down below, he begins to grow tired and weary. His arms begin to droop. And he has people there alongside him. Aaron and Hur come alongside him and lift his arms. I just find it the most moving picture. It's just a beautiful picture of the reality of people coming together and holding each other up in prayer, but holding the battle that is taking place down below in prayer. We don't want to be ignorant to it. And maybe we don't talk about it enough, but there is a battle for your life. There is a battle for your heart. There is a battle for your mind. And that's why this idea of intercession and persevering in prayer feels so much more important. Because the intercession on the hill, and I don't know if somebody said this, they probably did, but the intercession on the hill affects the battle in the valley. And so even to reflect on what I shared at the start, if we want to see impact, we want to see transformation in our own lives, in our own family, in our own spheres of influence, there's no way around it but persevering, crying out to the Lord in prayer. And we're going to need to do it together. Because there will be times, as Neville's already said, we need to do it together. There will be times where Nev's arms droops, or Paul's arms droops, or Johnny's. There's going to be times when people's arms droop. That's why this idea of corporate prayer, that's why our feels like even more in this season that our Sunday nights, second Sunday of the month, we just gather together corporately just to pray and to worship. Almost in some way an idea of lifting our arms together in prayer. Because if we intercede well on top of the hill, it's going to affect the battle in the valley. And so there's just going to be times where we just need to go up the hill together. That's what I felt this morning. We just need to go up the hill together. And I love it when we come to think about prayer and when we throw out the invitation and the challenge to prayer that we just we'll go up the hill together. As cheesy as that might sound, I don't even care if it does. Let's go up the hill together. And so that's the challenge for us, I think, to persevere in prayer, to consider consecration and purity, and to pursue the new thing that the Lord is doing. And so Judith and the guys are going to come, Paul and Prima are going to come, we'll finish with one last song. And I encourage as we do that, I know the temptation as we do the last song that we begin to think about dinner, begin to think about our afternoon plans. So just to encourage us to maybe to challenge yourselves, just to ask the Lord what it is maybe that He's saying to you through some of this morning.